Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle AI Decision Maker Summit. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce Tolgai Kizalema, Director of MS and Cybersecurity Program at Dominican University of California. We are excited to have Tolgai with us for a keynote titled Fortifying AI, Strategies for Security and System Integrity. Welcome, Tolgai, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Everson. I really appreciate it. So, yes, my name is Tolgai Kizilma. Tolgai, like a short guy, very easy to remember. So, you have my information on LinkedIn. I encourage everybody to connect with me. Networking is one of the core benefits of these conference events. So, as you imagine, nowadays it's all about AI, right? We talk about AI, everything, each direction we go, anywhere, right? It's all about AI, about the benefits, about the risk. So, as AI becomes integrated into the core of modern systems, its vulnerabilities are starting to matter just as much as capabilities. So we need to really address them. We're seeing a new class of risks, right? Ones that don't target networks or servers, but the models and the data that drive AI decision making. So a tiny change in an input or a subtle tweak to a model can quietly distort the outcomes, disrupt the operations, and compromise privacy in ways that are incredibly hard to detect. So this shift means protecting AI isn't optional anymore. It is becoming one of the most urgent challenges organizations facing today. So let's dive in and we'll go through some of the relevant topics facing us today around AI. So the integrity imperative, why this is really important. The trustworthiness is important as much as its integrity, right? Without rigorous safeguards around data quality, training processes, model behavior, and the actions AI systems are all allowed to take, even the most sophisticated models, right? They can generate misleading insights, unsafe recommendations, or flawed autonomous decisions. So, making integrity as the foundational requirement for trust. And we talk about digital trust, different elements around it. So, it is an important element, the integrity aspect. There's the failures, right? They're not bugs, AI related failures. They are systemic vulnerabilities, and we have to address them. AI breakdowns, they really rarely stem from isolated coding errors. They usually emerge from fundamental weaknesses across the entire lifecycle of AI, such as if you have insecure data pipelines, inadequate validation steps, weak governance controls, or insufficient monitoring. They all reveal the structural gaps that we have with these technical defects. And of course, the outcome. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a tiny percentage of a carefully manipulated training data, like mislabeled medical scans, tempered financial transactions, or biased customer feedback subtly, right? They can all reorient a large model's decision patterns, causing billions of dollars in downstream impact as the AI repeatedly makes flawed predictions, misclassifies critical inputs, or reinforces harmful biases without detection. So we need to really have a good understanding about the different aspects as to why this integrity aspect is really important and we need to focus on that. So let's kind of have a look at the emerging landscape, the threat landscape. These are kind of the things we know, but it is always good to kind of remind ourselves. The adversarial attacks, I mean, subtle, carefully crafted changes. They're often invisible to the human eye, but they can alter how a model interprets the input, leading to outcomes such as misidentifying images, misrouting autonomous agents, and we're dealing with those nowadays, right? Exploiting the LLM jailbreak techniques that can bypass safety filters and eventually they enable unauthorized actions, which might have very harmful implications, safety implications. So we need to think about those adversarial attacks. Data poisoning. I mean, it's all about data, right? It's either the data is all or the model, kind of. Those are the two main pillars. So thinking about data poisoning by inserting manipulated, let's say, mislabeled or maliciously crafted samples into training or fine-tuning those data sets, right? Attackers can create those backdoors or they can create these pathways, the bias pathways that they can lie dormant until they get triggered, causing models to behave incorrectly or deceptively in production environments, creating all the disruptions, basically, and those negative implications. Model inversion is another one, right? Attackers can repeatedly query, let's say, a model available to them, and they can apply these statistical methods, statistical reconstruction techniques to infer or recreate sensitive training data like faces, health information, or confidential proprietary documents, for example, exposing the organizations to privacy violations, to regulatory non-compliance, and of course, intellectual property theft. That's really important too. Prompt injection, supply chain exploits, those are another area that we're kind of seeing. Malicious text prompts, for example, they're embedded hidden instructions, right? Or third-party components, for example, like libraries, plugins, or agents. They can cause an AI system to execute an unintended actions, ignore safeguards that we have in place, or around data, leak sensitive information, compromising the whole pipeline, the entire operational pipeline of the system, creating again negative business outcomes, business implications. There's, of course, our reliance on third-party supply chain risk because, I mean, we have to accept it. Most of the organizations don't have the means to do their own AI from scratch, right? All the way 100%, like an in-house. So there's that dependency, reliance on third parties. So because many AI systems, right, they rely on open source models, there's the compute, there's the power, all those requirements, the data sets, that's the other thing, like for training large data sets, and the tooling, any upstream compromise, that's really, I think, the key word here, such as if you have a poisoned weights, like in terms of the data, tampered checkpoints, malicious library updates, they can all infiltrate downstream products, creating deeply embedded vulnerabilities across the whole enterprise environments. So these are important threat landscape factors emerging, and we have to deal with them on a daily basis. And going forward, I think we'll get used to it. We'll have better ways to deal with it. But regardless, being aware about these different types of threat landscape and emerging items is really important. And the question then becomes, yeah, these are okay, but why? Why do we care? Why does it matter, right? What do we have to do about these? And what's the outcome? So the end result, if you don't handle these properly, if you don't do the right thing around these emerging threat landscape items, we might have to deal with different business implications. One is basically the trust, right? And that's what, so we're working so hard to build that trust in this digital world, basically. So undermining trust and accuracy. When AI integrity is compromised, the systems, the outputs of those systems, they become unreliable and eroding user confidence and degrading the accuracy needed for mission critical decisions. And that is really important, the accuracy and anything around data, because we make risk informed decisions, right, for business outcomes. Another one is really creating exposure across autonomous decision systems, critical infrastructure, and enterprise automation. Integrity failures, and those are, again, vulnerabilities that we have, the systemic vulnerabilities, they can propagate through the interconnected agents, right, the agentic systems, putting automated workflows, and as a result, really does that undermining that trust and accuracy again. So when AI integrity is compromised, whether it's through the adversarial attacks, it's the corrupted data, or unmonitored drift, right? The system model might drift. The model, they begin producing inconsistent or incorrect outputs, again, eroding the stakeholder trust, weakening that user adoption, diminishing the reliability required for the high-stake decisions in different industries like healthcare, finance, cybersecurity, public services, where the outcomes might be, especially in the healthcare, right? It might be deadly. And safety is really, we talk about CIA trial, confidential, integrity, availability, but in certain industries, it is more than that. Safety is really important, and the outcomes might be very deadly. So it is important. The impact in terms of around, let's say, regulatory compliance, that's also another one. Insufficient integrity controls can violate key regulatory obligations such as data quality, transparency, explainability, human oversight, and risk mitigation, resulting in audits and penalties, service shutdowns, or forced redesigns under framework like the ISO, NIST, and all those others. So there's that regulatory compliance, laws, regulations impact. So we have to take those into equations, and it's really important so to address those. So the real-time monitoring and AI is really important, but we need to really look at these. Okay, now that we have these, right, the threats out there, why did we have to worry about these, why they matter, what can we do from a strategic defense perspective? So the core defense strategies, I mean, we can kind of have 4 or 5 different approaches under main pillars. Data security and provenance, that's really important. Traceability. So that's really, as I mentioned, it's all about the data, it's all about the model. So, if you kind of address those properly, you're most of the way there. So curated, trusted data sets, right? It's all about data, making sure validating the source data, applying cryptographic signing, verifying the data entered into the whole pipeline. Those are important. Using statistical methods like for monitoring, embedding similarity checks, adversarial detection tools to flag unusual or poison samples before they influence the model, right? That's really important. Maintaining multiple independent data sources, that's another way to kind of do the security aspect. Is strict sanitization, filtering processes, and then periodically retraining against clean baselines to prevent the hidden or backdoors or drift, right? So that's really important to have that based on the clean baseline data that you have, so that you can, as needed, retrain the data and retrain the model as well. And of course, from a privacy perspective, you have to apply differential privacy, anomaly detection for data integrity, all those things. So the other aspect is about the model hardening, right? So adopting adversarial training, input validation is important for the model hardening. The other thing I think is in terms of flagging out distribution of malicious inputs, detection methods, integrating runtime monitoring for that behavior drifting. Continuous monitoring is always important. The alignment with, let's say, stress testing and with adversarial inputs, so that you do these periodic reviews, so that have an ongoing visibility. In terms of access and those type of things, least privilege access is always an important item. Where you have a sandbox execution, role-based policy constraints, right? These are things that you can do to harden the model. Of course, we want to find out about the different vulnerabilities. There's this red teaming, continuous testing aspect, right? To always find out and make sure is our system data model, they're all up to there. So simulations, real world attacks, like using their frameworks out there, like MITRE, Atlas playbooks, maintain that feedback loop between the developers, like AI developers, security engineers, and the governance team. So making sure the technical and non-technical teams come together so that they have the visibility to the whole environment. And of course, the governance and transparency is really important. We want to make sure there are a lot of standards, frameworks out there applying security audits for whether it's the ISO standard or NIST risk management framework. So we want to be able to utilize those as much as possible. Establishing explainability or version control for model changes is important. Again, we talked about third-party software bill of materials, right? Using AI software bill of materials is another important element from a governance and transparency perspective, so that we are having that model lineage tracking, right? Guardrails, policy engines, but most importantly, human in the loop checkpoints that are really important. So with that in mind, I really want to focus on the real-time monitoring, right? That is important. So the role of real-time monitoring and audit is it allows us to do the early anomaly and threat detection, right? Real-time monitoring of inputs, outputs, right? Agent actions. They all enable organizations to instantly identify unusual patterns, such as maybe unexpected input. There's a spike. There's this off-norm model behavior, right? They're all important. So transparent decision and tracking explainability. So another way to look at it is we have detailed AI audit trails, right? They capture every step of the decision-making process, including the data sources, the intermediate reasoning, applied rules, different model versions. So giving the organization the full visibility into the how and the why and output is generated. And sometimes, again, it is important. And that all has to do with the stakeholder trust and supporting internal validation or external scrutiny. There are, again, regulatory compliance, governance, assurance aspects of the real-time monitoring. That's important. Uh, Accountability across the whole AI lifecycle. That's, I think, another very, very important element. So the audit trails recording every configuration change, every model update, policy adjustments, human intervention, right? Creating that transparent chain of custody that reduces the risk of unauthorized modifications and ensures accountability, right, for system integrity across development, deployment, and ongoing operations. So when we kind of consider all these different elements in terms of how real-time monitoring AI audit is, kind of contributing, right? It is really important. Another element that is important to mention is the model performance, right? Continuous model performance. And of course, the drift monitoring, because we spend all the time, effort, go through the whole life cycle, do the proper planning, and get the right outputs. But guess what happens, right? Due to various reasons, that output, the model performance drifts in time if we don't do this continuous real-time monitoring, the audits, and the initial outcome, which maybe is aligned in terms of our expectations. But if you don't do the auditing, monitoring, we may not be realizing, but we might have negative consequences, business implications. So definitely need to focus on the drift monitoring by, let's say, tracking data quality, by looking into the accuracy metrics, confidence distributions from a statistical perspective, and deviations from baseline patterns, because that's really what we have initially. Once everything's all done, optimized, we have all those baseline and patterns. And in time, through continuous monitoring audit, we can look at it, okay, are there deviations? And that allows the organizations to detect the drift early and proactively retrain or recalibrate models, helping maintain reliability, fairness, alignment with the evolving business needs, user expectations, and regulatory standards. So the reason I mentioned that, because things change, right? There's this dynamic nature of the business landscape. And we really want to make sure we keep an eye on it, right? The data changes, the requirements change. So it is important to keep an eye on ongoing visibility, monitoring, auditing, so that we can address these different areas through the audit and monitoring, continuous monitoring. So another element when we're looking into AI systems topics is always about metrics and measurement, right? Because it is one thing to kind of think about, okay, we come up with the right model, the right, using the right data, trained data for the right reasons, right? There's always that business outcomes that we want to achieve, accomplish, and there are associated risks that we want to, optimize. There's the resource limitations. We want to also optimize the use of them. And of course, we have to do them in a very being compliant manner with the existing laws and regulations. But at the same time, to get there, like where we are here, and we have that roadmap to get there, part of the strategy, we do all that work, but along the lines, we kind of forget, right? Are we doing good? I mean, and that's really the role of metrics, the performance aspect, right? The measurement aspect. And it is really, for that reason, very important that we have to have the right metrics, whether you call them KPIs, key risk indicators. Metrics do matter. So for AI purposes, I mean, you can come up with various types of metrics. But again, remember, this is all about the model. It's all about the data. So metrics around those two really are important. So we can think about, let's say, the model integrity index, right? So that might be, for example, a number of red team exploits mitigated divided by the total found, right? How many exploits we mitigated and how many we found. So if you divide those two, that'll give us some index. And this metric might show how resilient a model is by measuring that proportion of successfully fixed vulnerabilities relative to the total discovered during the red team testing. That's why red team, right? Red teams are important, and we really want to kind of spend the time, resources, and make sure we have a qualified people with the skill set, So it does tell us something in terms of the integrity index, the model integrity index. The other thing is around data. So the trust score. Let's say you have all these different data sets, right? It's all about data, AI, obviously. So the percentage of data sets verified with provenance, for example, indicating the overall reliability of training and operational data by assessing how much of it has validated origin, lineage, and integrity checks. So it's really around um, confirming, right, the validation, the integrity of the data. So it does give you a certain level of assurance, that score, the percentage of the data sets verified. We have, from a business continuity planning, disaster recovery perspective, we have these recovery time objectives, right, which we are familiar with. So when we have incidents, breaches, incidents, disruptions, the recovery time objective is also important. So it does measure how quickly we can get up and running and then kind of go back to operations and start providing the service and products, right? So that's really important, the resiliency aspect. So from that perspective, how quickly can the organization, can they detect, can they contain, can they restore AI systems and operations after a failure, after an attack, and or after a misalignment event, right? Again, think about the model, think about the data. So there are all these things. And they're also governance related metrics, KPIs. And they are mostly aligned with various standards and frameworks we have out there, ISO and NIST. So, and they track the maturity aspect, how well the organization's AI governance practices, they map to these different maturity tiers, like whether it's on a 4 scale, 5 scale, doesn't matter. And the purpose is showing progress in accountability, in risk management, monitoring, and trustworthiness of the controls. So there are some questions. I'll try to address it towards the end. The future of AI assurance, again, we have to think about it, right? The transition from secure coding to secure training, that's really important. I think it is important. We've been kind of thinking about the coding aspect, and AI kind of makes a lot of things easier. So the training is really the focus, the secure training. As AI systems rely more on data than code, organizations in general, they have to shift their focus toward protecting data sets, the training, the pipelines, the whole thing, and the model behavior, rather than just traditional software vulnerabilities. Of course, they have a part in this whole thing, the infrastructure software, but the focus has to shift to data sets, pipelines, and model behavior. Of course, the other aspect is maybe moving toward real-time trust scoring or zero trust AI architectures, real time. That's another important element. Continuously evaluating the model behavior with dynamic trust scores while enforcing zero trust principles, which we're all familiar with, right? Validating every action in an AI system, or maybe an agent attempting to take those actions. And there's also, of course, the human element, the human oversight, importance, the collaboration between security, compliance, ethics, maintaining that human oversight is important. Effective AI governance now requires this cross collaboration of functional teams to jointly defining controls, reviewing high-risk decisions, ensuring humans remain accountable for the outcomes generated, especially by the autonomous systems. That's important. So again, these are all important elements we want to kind of think about going forward. Let's see, transition, secure training. I think that's really it. So overall, AI is important. It is here. It's a reality. And we just want to make sure we do it right? It just needs to be safe, resilient, trustworthy, and not just smart. We know AI systems are smart and they help us with the efficiency goals, the productivity goals. But our ultimate goal really should be that it needs to be safe, it needs to be resilient, it needs to be trustworthy. So as we push AI deeper into the systems that run our businesses, our cities, our daily lives, right? This principle becomes really non-negotiable because the outcomes, the output is really impacting us. So we want to make sure it is the safety is there, the resilience, the trustworthiness is there, right? So the intelligence alone is no longer enough. The future of AI it depends on our ability to secure it, to most important, to govern it, and continuously ensure that it behaves as intended, even when the world around it changes, and change is constant. So building safe and resilient AI means investing in transparency, real-time monitoring, strong auditability. It means designing systems that can detect anomalies, withstand attacks, recovering quickly when things go wrong. And we know things will go wrong, right? It's not a matter of if but when. And above it all means that creating trustworthy AI is really important. Systems that learn, right? That earn the confidence, not through the blind adoption, but through accountability, reliability, and responsible use. So again, as we move forward, our challenge is very, very clear. Building AI that advances innovation without compromising integrity. That's really the focus, and that's what we should be aiming for. So thank you for this. I really, really appreciate it. We have a couple of questions. Let me see. We have a couple of minutes. We can go through some of the questions. Let's see. Um, how can organizations proactively identify when a model has been subtly manipulated or corrupted? So again, it's about the data. It's about the model. Um, Really, baseline change controls really is important. Of course, using technology is also important. We want to make sure we are using the latest technology. We cannot solve today's problems using yesterday's technology. So make sure you have the right technology tools in place. Proactive is important. Training is really important. But manipulation or corrupted model. Ongoing continuous monitoring, as I mentioned, is very important. Those differences, right? Changes, subtle changes. So it's important to look at it from that perspective too, so that we can identify these subtle changes and to make sure, and of course, comparing it to the baseline versions, basically. Let's see. How early should security considerations be introduced into the AI development process? That's a very good question. I mean, we talk about life cycle. I really like to emphasize the concept of a life cycle, right? So it doesn't matter what life cycle it is. We talk about data life cycle, vendor management life cycle. It doesn't matter. It's the concept of a life cycle. So AI has that too. There's this AI life cycle, like software development life cycle, for example. So security, like privacy, and we have these concepts like by design, like privacy by design, security by design. And now the notion is AI by design, right? So the idea is make sure those concepts are introduced as early as possible in the whole development life cycle, or in the whole life cycle, whatever the life cycle we're discussing. So the security considerations, as soon as we come up with the idea, right? And most of the time it's all about business use cases because we see the value with these. We want to make sure the right people are involved. That's number one. And trying to solve that business case, trying to address that pain point, whatever. But at the same time, we want to make sure certain risk considerations are also given by the right people. Security is one of those. So we want to make sure security aspects, privacy aspects, they are addressed by the right people. And the only way that can happen is to make sure that those people are involved in these discussions. As soon as we start having a discussion around the business use cases, different outcomes, expectations, having that conversation will really be helpful and will allow us to manage the associated risks so that we can optimize the overall value that we're getting by using these AI systems. So the earlier the better. And unfortunately, some organizations, or most organizations, it's too late, right? By the time they start addressing security aspects, privacy aspects, it's kind of a bit late. So I really suggest those are, because it's about data. Unlike traditional systems, software, hardware, AI is all about data, right? It's also all about the models, and security and privacy aspects. They have to be addressed very early in the process and part of a governance structure. And that's the other thing you can do, right? To make sure you have the proper governance structure. If you have established that governance structure properly before you launch embark a AI effort project, security, privacy should be part of that, addressed properly by the right teams and departments. So with that, I really appreciate it. I'm hoping you get some value out of this conversation. Please connect. Thank you very much. Brittany, back to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tall Guy, for such an incredible keynote. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. This session, along with all today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin shortly at 1:10 Eastern, which will be a keynote titled Agentic AI, Farce or Force for Business Success. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, Tall Guy.
Thank you. My pleasure.